Good evening. Today's discussion is on the resurrection of Jesus Christ, particularly the Emmaus story, which is recounted in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 24, verse 13 to 35. The walk to Emmaus. The mystery of the journey of Jesus in the world does not end with the resurrection, but with another journey, a walk, in fact, on the road to Emmaus. As the Gospel of Luke recounts, several days after the crucifixion, two men were walking along the road to Emmaus, a town some 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were deeply absorbed in their conversation and hardly noticed when a third man quietly joined them on the road. After a while, this stranger interrupted to ask them what they were talking about so intently and with such sadness. They told him that they were discussing the condemnation and death of Jesus and the discovery of the empty tomb. A certain women of their company who had come back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that Jesus was alive. The stranger agreed that Jesus was indeed living, and as they continued to walk together, took them through an interpretation of the scriptures, showing them in chapter and verse how everything that had happened had in fact been foretold. The two men were feeling great warmth in their hearts toward the stranger, and when they reached the house in Emmaus, where they would be staying, they invited him to join them as it was now late. The stranger agreed and went to dinner with them, blessing the bread and breaking it to give to them. At that moment, they underwent a shock of recognition and knew the man not as stranger, but as Jesus Christ. Immediately, he disappeared. The two men instantly got up and sped along the road back to Jerusalem, where they told the disciples the wonderful things that they just happened. As they were telling these things, Jesus suddenly appeared among them, quieted their fears, and he was just a spirit, and invited them to handle his very physical hands and feet. Then he asked for something to eat and proceeded to chew and swallow some broiled fish. He concluded his visit by blessing and empowering them, and they were filled with great joy. Emmaus journey continues the mystery rites of the resurrection in new and remarkable ways. Luke's gospel narrative is one of completion and fulfillment. Emmaus is cited as 7 miles from Jerusalem. In the tradition of sacred numbers, 7 completes the quest. The Emmaus walk marks Christ's return from the eternal to the temporal world in an act of compassion, relatedness, community, and most importantly, concreteness. Jesus, in his 3-day sojourn in the non-local reality, has become capable of acts of radical humanity. The real presence was difficult for the disciples. Something kept them from seeing who it was until the moment he broke the bread and offered it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him. Here we discover the Eucharist as continuing the central mystery of the Christian tradition, which ironically and almost comically turns out to be a glorying in the most physical and concrete of all experiences. The ritual gesture of the consecration of the bread by Jesus is an enfleshment, a palpable statement of the concreteness of God in the world, an earthly presence of Christ among the community of the faith. Faith consciousness recognizes in the symbols not merely a meaning, a memory, or an understanding of Christ, but a reality of the divine in the all of all that is human, that is ordinary, that is natural. Bread is broken together, and fish is chewed. Hands and feet are extended to be touched. There is nothing abstract here, nothing of the ephemeral spook or the smoky apparition. No one is hallucinating. On the contrary, they are invited to engage together in the most sensory of communions. Why you are troubled, and why do questionings arise in your heart? See my hands and feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a spirit has not flesh and bones as you see I have. The ideal world of possibilities and patterns that are held in the non-local reality, where Jesus spent 3 days, and the real and local existential world met on the road, where Jesus shows up eating and drinking and touching, has brought together the passion and possibility of what before had been divided and distinguished worlds. In the hidden non-local, what we would call divine life of Christ, in the substance of things unknown, in the ultimate mystery of a reality beyond our control or our images, the God seed comes and says, touch me, and we are guarded and transformed in the love of the beloved. We can refuse to see with our eyes and hear with our ears and know with our minds. But it is difficult to doubt the reality of flesh, touching flesh, and it is well nigh impossible to reject the even greater impression of heart touching heart. At this point, we discover that we know nothing, but we feel everything. Surrendering to feeling, we find that being so loved, we have no choice but to become love, to become the stranger on the road of everyone's Emmaus, the one who discloses the guardedness within, the one who says, touch me. In this mystery and this consciousness, we are required to die to our learned habits and ways of knowing, and to be reborn in a learned ignorance that is the essence of wisdom. It was in the evening of the journey to Emmaus that this sacramental consciousness was reached, not in the fullness of the day. Thus, it is in the darkness that there is light, in the unseeing there is seeing, in the absence of Jesus there is the Christ present. Augustine once experienced a series of visions of Christ that finally began to wane. Filled with anguish at the loss of the beloved, the saint cried out to Christ to return. Out of darkness he heard the words, I have disappeared right before your eyes in order for you to return into your heart to find me. Thus, for the disciples of Emmaus and for Augustine, the sacramental Christ came not first to liberate their outer worlds, their Israel, from the outside in, but to liberate them from the inside out, from the deepest place within that seemed unreachable, from that kingdom within that seemed elusive, from that voice within that seemed silent, from the spirit within that seemed dead. For it is in the heart that the mystery of the Eucharist transforms our lives alchemically, in our hearts, in our feelings, in the places where we are touched. The miracle of transubstantiation occurs, and spirit and matter become each other. Thus, in the resurrection of the eating, drinking, loving, empowering, touchable one, the incarnation is completed. The human and divine orders are reunited, rebirthed in the fullness of human consciousness, and creation is found good, and matter is found holy, and nature is not corrupt but sacred, not as spirit nor as matter, but as one in a love that knows no understanding. That is, as the disciples said, too good to be true, but it is true nonetheless by a wonder beyond all reason. In the most ordinary of acts, we disclose the material intimacy of a God who is closer to us than our minds or eyes. For when we eat and drink and touch and perform sacramentally the thousands other acts of human consciousness, we become what we already are, the fellow traveler on the road to Emmaus. This is the good news. This is a great gift, the gift of simply being all in all, love in love, hope in hope, faith in faith. Happy Easter to you all.